Part 4. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 31. When she heard Musian's bid, the tall and charming woman on the stage glanced at the luxurious private room with slightly surprised eyes. There are nearly 100 similar private rooms under the stage in this auction house, but Musian's private room is at the front of the stage, with only a gauze-like curtain as a cover. Although I couldn't see what the person inside looked like, I could still roughly see where he was sitting at this time. The young man in the private room looked very relaxed, holding a teacup in one hand and enjoying the massage from the maid comfortably. Did this young master get into a fight with Yayu, or did he also recognize the value of this bronze iron piece? Fei Ying slightly narrowed her charming eyes and said softly, "Guest number 3 bids 500 spiritual stones. Is there any higher? In any case, this is a good thing for her. As long as the goods can be auctioned for a higher price, it is enough." 500 spiritual stones. Once Fei Ying's soft voice sounded in the auction. She looked around at everyone and deliberately waited for a few seconds before continuing, 500 spirit stones twice. In the audience, Yayu clenched his fists subconsciously and stared at the bronze iron piece. It can make the old man in the body wake up from his deep sleep and remind him to buy this bronze iron piece. This is enough to imagine the value of this bronze iron piece. But this is 500 spirit stones. Not everyone is Musian, and he can just take out so many spirit stones and squander them randomly. In the human world, the value of spirit stones may be much more valuable than gold and silver. These 500 spirit stones may be nothing to the Ye family, but for an ordinary heir of the Ye family, it will take at least 3 months to have accumulated so many spiritual stones. He only brought a total of 700 spiritual stones with him today. If he spent them all here, he would not even be able to buy the medicinal materials needed to advance to the Qi training realm later. Seeing Fei Ying's delicate lips slightly parted, trying to determine the final winner of the bronze iron piece, Yayu finally couldn't bear it any longer. His heart skipped a beat, and he spoke again, 700 spirit stones. This is all his savings. Even if Musian had a grudge against him, he would not fight to the end for a shabby guy. After all, no matter how powerful the Mu family was, 700 spirit stones would not be enough for a junior member of the clan. It is also extremely precious. Yayu prayed secretly while staring at the bronze iron piece, his eyes full of eagerness. However, at this moment, a careless voice came lightly. 1,000 spirit stones. As the bidding sound fell, Yayu's heart sank to the bottom. Some people in the venue were moved. The eldest son of the Mu family is really messy with his money. He actually asked Yayu for 1,000 spiritual stones for a piece of scrap metal that was very likely to go unsold. Fei Ying glanced meaningfully at the young man in the elegant room, then pursed her elastic and attractive red lips and said, 1,000 spiritual stones once. Yayu stared at the bronze iron piece on the stage, with a look of unwillingness in his eyes. After a long time, he suddenly sighed softly, his face regained its previous calmness, and said with a smile, "Congratulations to you, Master Mu. There is a huge secret in this bronze iron piece, which only sells for 1,000 spiritual stones. You really earned it? If you can't get it, you have to at least let Musian get some more blood." There was a trace of violence in Yayu's eyes. After Yayu finished speaking, the eyes of the bidders looking at the bronze iron pieces suddenly changed slightly. They originally thought that Musian simply had a grudge against Yayu and therefore deliberately targeted Yayu. But after being reminded by Yayu, their thoughts immediately became active. Thinking about it carefully, although the eldest son of the Mu family has always given people the impression that he has a lot of money and is brainless, it seems a bit unreasonable to squander it so casually. Could it be that, as Yayu said, there really are some secrets in this piece of bronze and iron? Fei Ying on the stage supported the table with both hands, and her plump breasts proudly held up her tight cheongsam. Her smart eyes swept over the crowd who seemed to be getting more and more excited, and she wisely chose something to give them something to think about. Time. At this moment, Musian's faint voice came from a certain private room. Originally, I just wanted to support Sister Fei Ying, but if someone is willing to take over, you can bid 1,100 spirit stones to take over. I won't continue bidding. His tone was calm, as if he was not interested in anything around him. But as the words fell, everyone present suddenly realized something. At first, they thought that the relationship between Musian and Yayu had gone to the extreme, so Musian would bid deliberately, but now that Musian said this, they realized. The bidding with Yayu may be intentional, but Musian's real purpose is probably to win the beauty's smile. If it were anyone else, they might doubt whether this bronze iron piece really had any great value. But the other party was Musian, the good-for-nothing young master who used to be famous in Tianqian City. Even though Musian's reputation has increased recently because of his fight against injustice. However, the prejudices in people's hearts are like a big mountain. How can they be moved away so easily? Seeing that Musian solved the problem with just 2 or 3 words, Yayu suppressed the anger in his heart and suddenly turned his head to look at Yajian on the other side. His eyes were filled with anger and he said, "Why do you want Master Mu so many times, against me?" "Master Ye, you are joking." "I am not targeting you," Musian replied slowly from the private room, "this is an auction. If you can bid, why can't I bid? Is it possible that others can't bid with you for what you want?" What Musian hates most is the self-righteous attitude of others. "Why can't I bid for what you can bid? Do I have to give in to you, and it's wrong if I don't?" Yeah, you heard this, although he wanted to refute, but he knew he was in the wrong, so he fell into silence. This guy actually used me as a shield just now. Fei Ying on the stage obviously saw Musian's purpose. It's obvious that Musian just wanted the bronze iron sheet. What about trying to make a beautiful woman smile? Just treat this kind of talk as a joke. She casually glanced at Musian in the private room, then retracted her gaze and said softly, "Master Mu bids 1,000 spirit stones, is there anyone who continues to bid?" She looked around at everyone and saw that no one answered, so she started a 3-beat countdown. In the end, the bronze iron piece successfully fell into Musian's hands. Next, various rare treasures were pushed to the front one by one, but Musian was not very interested in them. The fundamental reason why he came to the auction house today was to get some medicinal materials and chat with Mr. Huang of the Morning Light Chamber of Commerce to get some money for suppressing bandits. As for the bronze iron piece, it was purely an unexpected gain. After all, the so-called ordinary copper and iron that the protagonist likes, is generally not ordinary. As for what the value of this copper and iron is, I will slowly study it after I go back. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 32. As the auction ended, Yayu also won the herbs he needed, and at this moment he was chatting with Fei Ying in front of the backstage. If I'm not mistaken, the herbs that Master Ye bought should be the herbs for refining chi training pills, right? Are you about to break through the chi training realm? Fei Ying, who was tall and curvy, couldn't help but look at the young man twice more when she ordered her servants to hand over the herbs to Yayu. He was almost at the chi training realm in just a few months. Such a speed of cultivation was really a bit amazing. Feeling the woman's surprised eyes, Yayu couldn't help but feel a little proud in his heart, but his face was still calm. He shook his head and smiled modestly, "It's just that I'm back to the chi training realm. It's normal to practice faster. It's a pity that I still have too few spirit stones on me then." Yayu sighed with some regret. The bronze piece finally fell into Musian's hands. But fortunately, he probably didn't know the value of the bronze piece. This was one of the few psychological comforts in Yayu's heart when he was regretful. "Sister Fei Ying, are the herbs I want ready?" At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from behind, and Yayu was brought back to reality. Yayu turned his head slightly to look over. Under the guidance of a maid, Musian came over as if he was strolling in the garden. He had a gentle smile on his face, and his handsome face that was enough to make men jealous made the maids present look at him twice more involuntarily. Compared with Yayu's low-key, Musian's high profile is naturally more likely to attract other people's attention. Fei Ying smiled and nodded, "It's ready, follow me to the side hall later." Musian naturally hugged Fei Ying's slender waist and smiled, "Let's go now, I have something to do later." Or does Sister Fei Ying have other things to do now? Fei Ying narrowed her eyes slightly and glanced at Musian with a charming look. In less than 2 seconds, she smiled softly, "Okay, then I'll take you there now." Unlike Yayu, a modest boy, Musian's performance seemed more real. If you like someone, you like them, and you will express it directly. Besides, the other party's Sister Fei Ying was still very useful to her. The woman in the red cheongsam stepped on a pair of red embroidered shoes, looked at Yayu sideways, and said softly, "Master Ye, welcome to continue to cooperate next time, we will leave first." After that, she left with Musian. Yayu turned his head to look at the woman with charming and enchanting back curves, and then looked at the boy who was holding her waist generously. For some reason, his originally calm state of mind was broken again. Originally, in Yayu's view, women would only affect the speed of his cultivation. However, seeing Musian's enjoyable attitude, Yayu's heart was shaken. His enjoyable attitude seems to be pretty good. On the other side, when the two of them left the backstage and walked on the path to the side hall, Fei Ying suddenly glanced at Musian casually, squinting and smiling. "Have you hugged enough, little pervert? If not, can we continue?" Musian said half-jokingly. "What do you think?" Fei Ying glanced at him and gently pushed the boy's hand away. Musian sighed, "I spent 1,000 spirit stones to buy a piece of broken copper and iron for Sister Fei Ying. What's wrong with comforting me?" Fei Ying raised her lips slightly, outlining a charming arc, and said, "This kind of words may be enough to fool those yellow-haired girls, but it can't fool me." Musian said seriously, "If it's not for you, could it be for this piece of broken copper and iron?" Fei Ying glanced at the boy and chuckled, "It's hard to say. As an auctioneer, Fei Ying sees all kinds of people every day. Musian's sweet words may be able to win over some girls who are not very experienced in the world, but for this woman of higher level, it is still not enough." The two chatted all the way to the side hall. Fei Ying asked the servants to hand over the medicinal materials and bronze pieces that Musian needed to him. Looking at this pile of things, Fei Ying thought for a while, took off the ring on her hand, and put all the things into the ring. "You're going to give me this ring?" Musian said in surprise. "You wish?" Fei Ying glared at Musian and said, "I'll lend it to you first. Just find time to have someone return the ring to me tomorrow. This thing was left to me by my sister before she entered the section. If you lose it, I won't forgive you." Such a valuable item was lent to him, and this move naturally made Musian feel a little more favorable. He nodded slightly and took the ring seriously. Then, he suddenly asked, "By the way, who is your sister? Maybe I know her." Fei Ying smiled with narrowed eyes and said, "She is a very beautiful person, but you must not know her. My sister rarely left home since she was a child. Even if she went to Lianji sect later, she didn't like to leave the section. She would come to visit me occasionally, but she would hide her identity from outsiders." "It sounds quite mysterious," Musian muttered, and seeing that the other party had no intention of explaining, he did not continue to ask. After chatting with Fei Ying for a few more words, Musian took the ring and said goodbye to Fei Ying. Mu Mansion. After entrusting the maid to hand over the medicinal materials in the ring to Mr. Ren, Musian returned to the room and eagerly took out the ordinary-looking bronze piece. He ran his fingers over the surface of the bronze piece and felt it was rough and uneven. Other than that, there's nothing special about it. The thing that can be targeted by Yayu is definitely not as ordinary as it seems, but how can this thing be activated? Musian played with the bronze piece in his hand casually. Unlike Yayu, Musian does not have a grandfather in his body. Similarly, he is not a lucky person, so there is no such thing as accidentally activating the bronze piece and then obtaining its secret. Possibility. The Great Elder has traveled to the mainland in the past and has seen a lot. He may know the origin of this bronze piece. Thinking of this, Musian immediately set out to find the Great Elder in the secret room. However, as soon as he reached the secret room, he was stopped by a spy. "Young master, the Great Elder has ordered you not to see anyone during the seclusion period." Musian's eyes moved slightly. "The Elder is in retreat." The secret agent nodded slightly and said respectfully, "The Great Elder usually doesn't see anyone. He only woke up from seclusion by chance before and asked you to come over and talk to him." It seems that the Great Elder is also a cultivator. Musian could not help but feel a little regretful and nodded. "If the Great Elder is free later, remember to tell him that I have something to talk to him about." The spy nodded in agreement. Unable to see the Great Elder, Musian had to go back to his room, planning to study the secret of the bronze piece himself. When passing by the courtyard, I happened to see the noble and aloof Bairuoxi. She stood in front of the yard, wearing a long white dress, with two spaghetti straps gently draped over her seductive shoulders. Her skin was white and crystal clear, and her face looked almost perfect from the side. A few strands of hair were draped in front of her shoulders, adding a bit of charm that she didn't have in the past. Seemingly aware of Musian's presence, she turned her head slightly and smiled slightly. "Master Mu, good morning." Musian nodded lightly and walked towards Bairuoxi. "Young Master Mu should have gone to Chinexai auction house this morning, right? Have you found the relevant medicinal materials?" When Bairuoxi said this, there was a little hope in her eyes. If the relevant medicinal materials are found, her father can be cured within 2 days. Only this pillar of the Bai family can stabilize the situation. Musian played with the bronze piece in his hand and chuckled, "I found it, and there is an unexpected harvest." Bairuoxi breathed a sigh of relief quietly in her heart. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she was quickly attracted by the bronze piece in Musian's hand. Her eyes were slightly fixed on the bronze piece. Bairuoxi's eyes moved slightly, and she suddenly said, "Can you show it to me?" "Of course, but the origin of this thing is mysterious. I'm afraid it won't be easy to decipher its secrets." As soon as Musian finished speaking, he saw Bairuoxi lowering her head slightly and untying the pendant on her chest. Musian couldn't help but take another look. From his perspective, what he could see was completely different from usual. Big and white. But soon, Musian's eyes were attracted by the ornament in Bairuoxi's palm. At this moment, in Bairuoxi's palm was a bronze piece that looked like a crescent moon, which was exactly the same as the bronze piece he had taken before. As if possessing spiritual consciousness, the two bronze pieces quietly melted together under Musian's gaze. At the same time, behind Bairuoxi, an ancient bronze sword appeared in the field of vision, and a terrifying sense of pressure came towards her. Musian looked at the scene in surprise, and couldn't help but look at the elegant and aloof beauty, and said, "Ruoxi, where did you get this piece of bronze?" Bairuoxi explained, "This was passed down from my father's generation. My father said that this bronze ornament has been passed down for many generations. It is an amulet used by our ancestors to protect the Bai family." With that said, she handed the bronze pendant to Musian. "Master Mu, if you don't mind, please accept this. Although the Tongue Mei pill is gone, this thing may be able to help you in the future. As long as you inject spiritual energy, the ability of the bronze pendant will be activated." Musian took the bronze hanging and played with it for a while, trying to inject spiritual energy into it. However, it was of no use. "It seems that this thing has nothing to do with me after all, or is this an ancient weapon that can only be used by descendants of the Bai family?" Musian quickly felt relieved and walked behind Bairuoxi. "Master Mu. Bairuoxi subconsciously wanted to turn around, but Musian had already hung the bronze pendant again on Bairuoxi's jade-like snow-white neck. Since this thing was passed down from your ancestors, there is no reason for me to seize it. You should keep it for yourself, Musian said. Bairuoxi's smart eyes stared straight at Musian, with mixed feelings in her heart. Obviously, when he asked Musian for help before, he also said that he would only offer benefits that would make the Mu family excited. But now, the Bai family has not given corresponding benefits, but he still helps. And he also gave her the bronze piece he got. Thinking of what Musian had done in the past few days, Bairuoxi felt as if something soft in her heart had been gently poked. She subconsciously placed her hand in front of her plump breasts and gently grasped the bronze pendant. When Bairuoxi looked up at Musian again, her eyes had softened completely, and the last bit of vigilance in her heart also disappeared quietly. At this time, Musian suddenly asked, "Can you try to inject spiritual energy again?" Bairuoxi came back to her senses, and after hearing this, she injected spiritual energy into the bronze pendant again. Behind her, a bronze sword suddenly appeared, and a strong pressure came again. Although this pendant was just a fusion of two bronze pieces, from the breath emitted by the bronze pendant at this time, if the bronze sword behind it was sacrificed, at least that attack would have the power of the spirit refining realm. Silently looking at the bronze sword that released terrifying pressure, and then looking at the girl, Musian was speechless for a long time. Could it be that she is the protagonist? Musian silently complained in his heart. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 33. It seems that this bronze fragment should have been the weapon of an ancient powerful person, and it is suspected to have been left by the ancestors of the Bai family. So now Bairuoxi can easily activate the power of this bronze sword after injecting spiritual energy. Musian looked at the bronze sword behind Bairuoxi that seemed to penetrate between heaven and earth, and secretly guessed in his heart. Perhaps she noticed that Musian was looking directly at her. Bairuoxi's eyes flashed slightly, a hint of shame flashed in her eyes, and she said softly, "Master Mu, why are you staring at me?" Although girls in the aloof period made people want to conquer them, now Bairuoxi, who has added a bit of weakness due to her poor family situation, seems to be pretty good. Musian returned to reality from his thoughts and said, "It's okay, I'm just thinking about what will happen in Longshao Forest in 2 days." As he said that, he suddenly changed the topic and asked, "What level of Qi training are you at now?" 8th level of Qi training, Bairuoxi said softly. Musian was stunned for a moment and subconsciously glanced at the graceful girl. Bairuoxi's experiences during this period made him almost forget that the eldest lady of the Bai family was not just a vase, she was also one of the geniuses among her peers. The enchantress from the Chenexai merchant family, the eldest lady from the Bai family, and Yayu, the former genius of the Ye family, these 3 people are among the top in terms of talent in Tianqian City. However, Yayu is different from the other 2. He has such a cultivation speed purely because of the Qi of heaven. If the bronze sword is activated, it may be possible to inflict a certain degree of heavy damage on the monks in the god refining realm without taking precautions, Bairuoxi added. Musian nodded slightly. These days, I am embarrassed to say that I am a genius if I can't kill by leapfrogging. Geniuses who can leapfrog and kill have real gold content. Only Musian is still at the 2nd level of Qi training. It's really interesting to think about. In my impression, the supporting villains defeated by the so-called protagonist are basically at a higher level than the protagonist, but not too high. All in all, the realm between the two parties will not be too different, which just gives the protagonist the possibility to slap him in the face. Master Mew, are you sure you can defeat Yayu? Bairuoxi suddenly asked. Musian shook his head, no. After he finished speaking, he saw the trace of worry in Bairuoxi's beautiful eyes and couldn't help but raise his hand to gently touch the girl's head. It doesn't matter whether you can beat Yayu or not, Musian continued. From the beginning, Musian's mind was not on the competition, the real focus was not on the competition, but on suppressing the bandits. Winning or losing the competition with Yayu is not important at all. Can I go to Longshao Forest with you that day? Bairuoxi continued to ask. Musian nodded and said, that's what I meant. I may have something to trouble you by then. If Bairuoxi was only in the Qi training realm, it might not be of much use when suppressing bandits. But if she can fight across levels and use that bronze sword when the time comes, that will be one of her unexpected trump cards. When Bairuoxi heard this, she shook her head slightly and said, young Master Mew, there is no need to be so polite. Ruoxi cannot repay your kindness. If you need anything, just say it. Ever since Musian went to see Father by that night, Bairuoxi had made up his mind to repay Musian's kindness no matter what the outcome was. When the time comes, I will protect you secretly, Bairuoxi continued. Once a battle breaks out between the gods in the Dragon Head Forest, even Wei Mengru may not be able to take care of Musian at all times. And by then, this important task should naturally be completed by her. After hearing the girl's serious words, Musian's expression suddenly became a little subtle. Although I know Bairuoxi means well, why does it feel weird? They were obviously peers, but the other party actually said that he wanted to protect himself. Seemingly uncomfortable being stared at by Musian, Bairuoxi lowered her eyes slightly and said softly, young Master Mew, please say something. Musian came back to his senses and said with a smile, I'll trouble you then. His voice suddenly changed, however, there is no need to protect me. There will be other things you need to do when the time comes. And only you can accomplish this. Bairuoxi slowly raised her head and looked at Musian, with confusion in her eyes. Musian took 2 steps forward, leaned close to the girl's earlobe, and whispered something softly. The warm breath blew gently into her ears, making Bairuoxi's crystal earlobes feel slightly hot, and her eyes were even more stained with a layer of mist, shining brightly in the sunlight. It wasn't until she heard Musian's words ringing in her ears, and after a while, that Bairuoxi slowly calmed down and nodded solemnly. I understand, if it is as expected by Master Mew, I will be the one to complete the final blow. Musian nodded with satisfaction, I'll trouble you then. While the two were chatting in the yard, a maid not far away walked into the yard. Seeing the cold beauty wearing a white dress and full of fairy spirit, her face was as red as drunkenness. She couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. He wondered if he had disturbed the young master. Just tell me if you have anything, Musian said calmly. The maid finally came to her senses and said respectfully, Master, the servants from the Genexai Chamber of Commerce are outside asking for an audience. Why do people from the Genexai Chamber of Commerce come to the Mew family? Bairuoxi looked at Musian subconsciously. Musian's expression remained unchanged and he didn't seem surprised. He nodded and said, I understand. Take him to the hall. After the maid left, Bairuoxi whispered, Master Mew, why do the people from the Genexai Chamber of Commerce? The Genexai Chamber of Commerce was one of the forces that suppressed the Bai family, but now the servants of the Genexai Chamber of Commerce came to the door in person, no wonder Bairuoxi cared so much. Don't worry, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, not to mention that the funds to suppress the bandits came from the Genexai Chamber of Commerce. They are sending money, Musian said with a smile. What businessmen care about is one profit. If the Genexai Chamber of Commerce does not contribute, it will naturally have to make money. However, Mr. Huang sent 100,000 spirit stones to the Mu family before he could deal with the black-robed man. This surprised Musian. After going to the hall, the servant who was already waiting respectfully handed over a Nai ring and said, "Master Mu." Musian took the Naja, scanned it with his spiritual consciousness, and after confirming the number of spirit stones, nodded with satisfaction, "Thank you for your hard work, let's get down." The servant did not leave, but said cautiously, "Master Mu, Miss Fei Ying asked me to take her Nai ring back. After I accept the ring, I can just return it to Sister Fei Ying," Musian said calmly. After all, this was something someone else lent him, and he didn't feel at ease letting an outsider send it back. When the servant heard this, he no longer hesitated, bowed slightly, turned around and left. Bairuoxi on the side had some doubts and said, "Miss Fei Ying's ring." Musian shook his head and said with a smile, "Don't worry about it, it's just a small matter. Rather than this, let's go see how the elixir refining at Mr. Ren's place is going. If nothing else happens, you can take the elixir to see your uncle tonight. Then, this bandit suppression feast will officially begin. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 34. Yeah family. Yeah you returned to Yes house with the medicinal materials he needed. After placing the medicinal materials in the corner of the room, he immediately sat cross-legged on the bedside and closed his eyes slightly. The originally delicate face seemed a little gloomy. It's no wonder that the piece of bronze and iron that should have belonged to him today was taken away by Musian. Not only that, even the chief auctioneer of the Chenexai Chamber of Commerce was so affectionate towards Musian. Recalling the sexy and voluptuous Miss Fei Ying's compliments to him today, and the scene after that when he was held in the arms of that playboy, Yu felt an unquenchable jealousy burning in his heart. Although he has always adhered to the belief that cultivation is the most important thing, today when he really saw the close contact between Musian and Fei Ying, and the scene where the two were talking and laughing, Yu still couldn't help but feel, some can't control their emotions. He bewitched his fiancée and stole the limelight that should belong to him. He even deliberately competed with him and took away the piece of bronze and iron that should belong to him. Recalling everything that happened in the auction house today, Yu clenched his fists involuntarily, and veins floated on his forehead. He took a deep breath, exhaled it slowly, and then managed to stabilize his mentality. Steady, don't mess up. Whether it's Bairuoxi or Fei Ying, the day after tomorrow, everyone will know who is the real person worth getting to know. But now, all he needs to do is practice, practice hard. Then in that day's competition, he defeated Musian openly and stepped on his head to take the top position. At the same time, Musian led Bairuoxi along a corridor to an open-air square in Mu's house. There are several cauldrons of different colors placed in front of the square. Musian doesn't know what the effects of these cauldrons are, but he roughly knows that every alchemist has several such cauldrons. It can be said that the cauldron is another life for the alchemist. Because he knew that Mr. Ren didn't like to be disturbed while he was refining alchemy, Musian did not come forward to say hello. Instead, he found an open space not far from the square and sat down, waiting for the old man. Bairuoxi walked to Musian's side. The hem of her white dress fluttered slightly in the wind. She bent her knees and sat down next to her. Under her thin white dress, her snow-white skin looked translucent and beautiful in the sunlight. However, Musian did not pay attention to the girl beside him at this moment. His attention was completely attracted by the old man in front of him who was refining alchemy. Even though there was a distance, Musian could still clearly feel the blazing temperature in the cauldron in front of the old man. Even standing here, you can feel a little bit of the temperature brought by the cauldron, not to mention the old man who is refining elixir. After nearly half an hour, the temperature in the cauldron gradually faded away. The old man slowly opened his cloudy eyes, raised his hand to make a hand gesture, and pointed to the cauldron in front of him. From the cauldron, 6 smooth-colored elixirs quietly flew out, and it seemed that there was a vague shadow of a roaring beast on the elixirs. A strong scent of medicine spread in the square. The old man took out 2 jade bottles, put one of the elixirs into the jade bottle, and then put the remaining 5 pills into the other jade bottle. After doing all this, he turned around and came to Musian, handed the 2 jade bottles to Musian, and said with a smile, "There are 6 pills in one batch, which is pretty good." Musian nodded and said sincerely, "Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Wren." The old man shook his head, with a rare smile on his face, and said, "Maybe to outsiders, refining alchemy is a very hard job, but for me, refining alchemy is not a hard job." Seeing that Musian failed to understand, the old man chuckled and gave an example. "Just like the young master went to Jiao Fangxi before, it is not easy for an old man like me to persist in going to Jiao Fangxi, but for the young master, it is as simple as eating and drinking, because for the young master, going to Jiao Fangxi is a happy thing." Bai Ruoxi glanced at Musian casually. Musian's performance during this period made her almost forget that the eldest son of the Mu family was a frequent visitor to the Jiaofang department in the past, but he has restrained himself recently. "Let's have a good chat and don't tear me down." The smile on Musian's face was a little unbearable. He handed one of the jade bottles to Bai Ruoxi and said, "Ruoxi, send this elixir to my uncle tonight." After saying that, he took out 2 pills from another jade bottle and handed them to the old man. "Mr. Wren, keep this. Maybe it will be useful when the time comes." The old man smiled kindly, nodded gently, and said, "Okay. The name of this elixir is Huiwen Dan. It is an excellent elixir for seriously injured patients. Taking the elixir and refining it can quickly restore the injury. This elixir may come in handy during this bandit suppression campaign." "The young master is really careful," the old man sighed again. "Although the man in black robe is in the god-refining realm, his strength is not as good as him. In addition, there is Wei Mengru, the patriarch of the Bai family, and a master of the god-refining realm from the Gongsun family and Chenexai Chamber of Commerce. Even if the man in black robe had wings, he wouldn't be able to fly away." However, Musian sighed and said, "Actually, I feel it's still unstable." The old man frowned slightly and said, "Young master, you think we are not enough to take down the man in black robe? If it's just a man in black robe, with Mr. Wren and others around, of course it's enough." Musian turned his head to look at the old man and smiled, "But the main course is over, and there are still side dishes to serve. The black-robed man is a common enemy, so they can cooperate. What about after the black-robed man dies? Without the common enemy, can the cooperating forces still share the same hatred? And, Bai Ruoxi's mother is only in the Qi training realm. How can a cultivator in the Qi training realm have the ability to swallow the 3 major families? There are probably other masters behind Bai Yuanfeng." The old man obviously understood what Musian meant, frowned slightly, and said, "What is the young master going to do? Ask those old immortals to take action." Musian shook his head, "Do this only when it is absolutely necessary. Several elders of the Mu family are masters of the spirit refining realm, but most of them have strange tempers. Several elders of the Mu family also saw this action. If Musian asked them for help directly, on the one hand, he might be rejected, and on the other hand, their evaluation of Musian in their hearts would also be downgraded. I have other more suitable candidates," Musian continued. The old man asked with some curiosity, "Who?" Musian glanced at him and said, "A person who always wanted to run away from home but stayed at home all the time. I'll give her a reason to run away from home this time, but whether she's willing to come out or not depends on herself. If she's willing to come out, I can also thank her for the Beast King vine she gave me." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 35. At night, Musian sat in front of the study, the candle light lit up warmly, and outside the window was a slightly lonely backyard. When the night wind blew, the leaves rustled. Wayman grew, wearing a goose-yellow dress, stood at the gate of the yard. After asking the servants to prepare the carriage, she turned her head to look at Biruoxi and whispered something. Then she and Biruoxi took the carriage and left the Mew family together, escorting Biruoxi to the secret hut where Bai's father lived. Musian turned the brush in his hand, tapped the table with his knuckles, shook his head gently, and sighed. No, it's still not safe. Although he had just written a letter to Lan Murian, who was in Lianji sect, seeking her help, it was already night from the daytime. It stands to reason that even if Lan Murian refused, she should have replied. Is it because she is still considering it, or does she not want to pay attention to herself? Or has she already agreed by default and is now on the way to Tianqian City? If Lan Murian didn't come, he could only make an exception and ask the elders who were in seclusion for cultivation. But unless it was absolutely necessary, Musian didn't want to ask the elders to help. First, this incident could be regarded as a test of him by the elders. Second, even if his father came, he might not be able to ask those elders, let alone a junior like him. After thinking for a while, Musian took out another paper crane from the drawer. According to what Musian knew, this paper crane seemed to be one of Lan Murian's magic weapons. Unlike ordinary paper cranes, it flew faster and could fly farther. The most important thing was that this paper crane could fly into Lianji sect without being blocked. This was the paper crane Lan Murian sent before, but he forgot to reply in those 2 days, so this time he just used the back to write to her again. The best situation is to persuade Lan Murian to go down the mountain, but if the senior sister refuses to go down the mountain, then we can only find other safe ways. Musian thought while dipping his ink and wrote another persuasion letter on the letter paper, adding some ambiguous teasing words. Teasing is not necessary, but appropriate teasing can enhance the relationship between the two parties. Lan Murian is obviously a cold beauty who is not good at taking the initiative. If he doesn't take the initiative, there will never be any result between the two parties. Appropriate teasing can also ease the embarrassment between each other. Of course, this trick only applies to those who are good at talking. Forced teasing will only make the woman feel awkward. After writing the letter, Musian folded the letter paper into a paper crane and threw it out of the window. He looked up at the paper crane flying out of the air and slowly exhaled. He has done everything he can on his side. Next, he can only wait for the news over there. Lianji sect. Lan Murian, wearing a white dress and with a cool temperament, was sitting in front of the pavilion. This was the back mountain of Lianji Peak. The mountain was steep, and the peak was shrouded in clouds and mist, with rich spiritual energy. Her face was covered with a veil, and the lapels on her chest could not hide her huge heart, and a touch of snow white could be vaguely seen. Holding a letter in her hand, a pair of smart and beautiful eyes scanned the contents of the letter, and a ripple appeared in her calm eyes. This should be the paper crane sent by Musian during the day. The letter roughly introduced what happened to him recently, and then casually mentioned the existence of the Black Robe Man and the threat to the people, and then talked about some characteristics and delicacies of Tianqian City. As for the content, it was basically that Musian tried his best to invite her to the Mew family as a guest, and by the way, he gave her the Huiwen pill he had refined. It is not difficult to see his sincerity just from the tone of the boy in the letter. However, although there were a lot of good words in the letter, Lan Murian still grasped the key points. After all, isn't it just that he wants me to help him when necessary? Why is he saying it so nicely? Lan Murian saw Musian's purpose at a glance. She folded the paper crane and put it into her ring. Then she stood up and left the back mountain. Sometimes it's like this. Even if you know that the good words the other person said are not completely true, you will still feel happy and have a good impression of the other person. Lan Mulian knew that Musian's words were suspected of brush up the favorability, but she still had a little more good impression of him. When passing a certain peak, there happened to be a sect disciple in the distance. When she looked up and saw Lan Mulian, her eyes suddenly became more yearning. Not only the male disciples of the sect, but most of the female disciples also respect the secluded disciple of the sect master. On the one hand, it is because of her identity and enchanting talent. On the other hand, although the senior sister Lan looks cold and difficult to approach, she is actually quite kind. If the sect disciples encounter some headaches on weekdays, she will occasionally come forward to solve them. However, most of the disciples have never seen Lan Murian's true appearance. "Sister, are you going down the mountain?" Lan Murian paused for a moment, nodded slightly, and said, "There are demons at the foot of the mountain, I'm going down the mountain." In the letter just now, Musian mentioned the black-robed man and his characteristics, although it is not certain that he is a demon. Judging from what Musian said at the time, the identity of the black-robed man is very likely to be an evil cultivator. Demons. The female disciple repeated it in her mouth, and couldn't help but secretly glanced at the slender woman in white. All the disciples in the sect knew that the senior sister Lan rarely went down the mountain, and even if there were demons, there would be other disciples to deal with it. It was really a bit suspicious. At this time, Lan Mulian suddenly shook her head again, and under the gauze, her elastic cherry lips pursed slightly, and a faint arc was outlined at the corner of her mouth. Maybe it should be more appropriate to call it running away from home. Musian didn't know that even without his invitation, she would still find a time to go to Tianqian City. It was not for the so-called running away from home, but just to see her sister and chat with her. The original plan was to go down the mountain in 2 months, but since Musian had already invited me, it would be good to take this opportunity to go down the mountain. Lan Mulian pinched the formula to pick up a cloud and left on the cloud. When Lan Murian left Lianji sect, she obviously didn't notice that at night, a paper crane quietly flew into Lianji sect while she was going down the mountain. It flew across the high peaks and slowly flew towards the back mountain pavilion. The paper crane finally landed on a black and white chessboard. The beautiful woman in a black dress paused in her move. She picked up the paper crane with her slender hands, and her eyes were confused at first. Then, a faint smile appeared in her beautiful eyes, and she slowly unwrapped the paper crane. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 36. That night, Bai Ruoxi, escorted by Wei Mengru, came safely to the cabin where Bai's father was recuperating. The girl's eyes fell directly on the man lying on the bed recuperating. She took a small step forward, her eyes full of concern, and placed the jade bottle in Bai's hand. Dad, this is Huiwen Dan, take it quickly to heal your injuries. Bai's father slowly opened his eyes. After hearing his daughter's words, he was stunned at first, then looked down at the jade bottle in his hand and said, Huiwen Dan? Did you find the Beast King Vine? Bai Ruoxi nodded gently. Master Mu went to Lianji sect overnight yesterday. I don't know what method he used to obtain the Beast King Vine. Today, Mr. Ren refined the Huiwen Dan. A trace of surprise flashed across Bai's father's eyes. Even though he knew that his daughter would not make such a joke, he still couldn't believe it. He opened the jade bottle, and a strong smell of medicine came to his face. Is it really Huiwen Dan? Bai's father's eyes were filled with surprise. With this Yuan Dan, he can recover from his injuries in just 1 night, and no longer have to lie on this bed like a useless person. In addition to the surprise, Father Bai was more confused. This beast king vine grows in Lianji section, not to mention people from the outside world, even the disciples inside basically don't have such precious medicinal materials. How did the eldest young master of the Mu family get the beast king vine? In any case, this time he really owed a great favor to the Mu family, or Musian. And the reason why the other party helped was probably because of Ruoxi. When Father Bai thought of this, he couldn't help but sighed with emotion and said, "Ruoxi, you have suffered a lot during this period." Bai Ruoxi shook her head gently, "Master Mu helped my daughter a lot, and I didn't do anything." When she said this, her eyes softened a little. Father Bai saw his daughter's reaction, and saw that her eyes seemed to soften a little when she mentioned Musian, and couldn't help but sigh secretly. He had always believed that Ye Yu would achieve greater success in the future, and his daughter might regret it in the future. However, Musian's performance in the past 2 days has made him waver. He could even get the Beast King vine in less than one night. The eldest son of the Mu family might not be as useless as the outside world said. Bai Ruoxi continued to ask worriedly, "By the way, Dad, how are you going to deal with Mom?" Father Bai fell silent after hearing this. After a long time, he sighed softly, "It can be regarded as my apology to your mother. Let's talk to her later." Bai Ruoxi's mood was also very complicated after hearing this. After all, Bai Yuanfeng is her biological mother, let alone she did bad things. Even if she did all the bad things, she would still be reluctant to let go. This is not a mentality like a saint, but a feeling that has accumulated over time. Family affection is not so easy to give up. Perhaps because the atmosphere was a little silent, Bai Ruoxi broke the silence softly and asked, "Dad, how did you and Mom meet?" Father Bai's eyes were slightly enlightened when he heard this. "Your mom?" He raised his head slightly, with a look of reminiscence in his eyes. "Your mom was picked up from outside and brought back to the Bai family. That name was also given by the elders of the clan. According to the description of the elders of the clan, when your mother was still a child, a strange purple light fell from the sky, and the surrounding demonic energy was filled. Your grandfather was worried that your mother would be corroded by the demonic energy, so he used the sealing method to seal the demonic energy. These years have been peaceful. I just didn't expect." Father Bai couldn't help but sigh when he said this. He thought that after so many years of husband and wife relationship, Bai Yuanfeng should have some feelings for him, but he never thought that Bai Yuanfeng would eventually plot against the Bai family and want to annex the 3 major families. This was the first time Bai Ruoxi heard about his parents' past. When he heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then, as if she realized something, she suddenly looked up at Father Bai and said, "So, Mother is a child bride?" "It's still different." Father Bai shook his head, "There were many people pursuing your mother at the beginning, and I was one of them. But later, because I became the patriarch." Father Bai did not continue to speak. After all, in front of his daughter, the vulgar old man also has to save face. He was embarrassed to say that he used some of the privileges of the patriarch to pursue Bai Yuanfeng in the end. "You should go back to the Mu family with Miss Wei first. Dad will feel more at ease if you are there." Father Bai continued, "But remember, if the boy from the Mu family runs into your room at night and says he wants to chat with you, don't believe him." The cold and weak beauty's face flushed instantly, her eyes flickered, and she lowered her eyelids slightly, and said shyly, "Dad, what are you talking about? Young Master Mu is not that kind of person. If he wanted to do it, he could have done it a long time ago. If Musian was that kind of person, he could have done it on the first day in the carriage, and he didn't have to wait until now." Being protected by his daughter in front of other men, Father Bai felt both annoyed and helpless. He could only look at his daughter deeply, and then shook his head secretly. If Musian had done it before, he would have only gotten Bai Ruoxi's body. But now, Musian can get the body and mind of the most beautiful woman in Tianqian City. This can be known just by looking at Byruoxi's reaction. Musian was naturally unaware of the conversation between father and daughter at this time. He took out a lot of spiritual stones from the Naja and placed them on the bedside, and then sat cross-legged on the bed. While the cauldron in the body was running, those spiritual stones quietly turned into purified spiritual energy, which was absorbed into Musian's body. This is the benefit of spiritual stones. Under normal circumstances, during cultivation, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth needs to be purified before it can be absorbed into the body. But the spirit stone itself is purified spiritual energy. Without this purification step, it can save at least 4 to 5 times the training time. Although winning or losing the competition is not important, Musian had wasted too much time on women before, so he naturally hopes to make up for it as soon as possible. After nearly 2 hours, the spiritual stones on the bedside disappeared bit by bit, and Musian felt that the spiritual energy in the cauldron had been filled by nearly 1/3. He slowly opened his eyes, raised his hand, and pushed out a palm from the air. There was only a bang sound, the door opened, and a crunching sound was clearly heard. Musian took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The spiritual energy around him surrounded him as he breathed in and out. Every breath he took was accompanied by the spiritual energy being absorbed into his body, giving him a feeling of comfort all over. Being able to learn from the old and incorporate the new, and turn spiritual energy into substantial power to exert, is the third level of Qi training. If you reach the peak of Qi training, you can even retrieve objects from the air and instantly take back weapons from far away. When you reach the God refining realm, you can fly with a sword like Wei Mengru. This feeling is really refreshing. The gap between the second level Qi training and the third level Qi training is quite big. Musian looked down at his palms and felt quite satisfied. He calmed down a little, closed his eyes again, and entered a meditative state. The next morning, Musian was at the training ground early in the morning, practicing martial arts with the maid. Although he was idle for a period of time due to his addiction to Nazi, Musian's foundation was still good. Coupled with Wei Mengru's reservations, when the two of them just competed in martial arts at the beginning, they were evenly matched. However, Wei Mengru was obviously not a proficient in melee combat. She switched from physical attacks to magic attacks as she hit. The dazzling light pollution made Musian's eyes a bit dazzled. She was really exhausted. Wait a minute. Seeing that Wei Mengru was about to slap her from the air, Musian immediately raised his hand and successfully controlled Wei Mengru with his voice. The maid's palm stayed in front of Musian's face, tilting her head slightly to look at him with doubt in her eyes, waiting for him to speak. Don't you know that hitting someone is not a slap in the face? Musian glanced at Wei Mengru's palm that was about to slap her face, put on a serious look, and said, "No more fighting, let's rest first, I'll return, I have something to ask you." Wei Mengru glanced at her palms in confusion, and then looked at Musian. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. After thinking for a moment, he finally nodded and did not slap that slap down. Musian found a step in the training ground and sat down, then turned to look at the maid and asked, "When you sent Byruoxi home last night, did you feel like you were being followed?" "If someone is following me, I will notice it immediately." Wei Mengru paused and continued, "unless the other person is a level above me." Wei Mengru is in the God refining realm, and the next higher realm is the void returning realm. In the world of mortals, those who return to the void realm are also known as land gods. There are so few of them that they are rare animals. When Musian heard this, he nodded slightly. In terms of investigation and counter-reconnaissance, Wei Mengru is a top-notch existence. In the final analysis, she can be classified as an assassin. Since she said so, she can rest assured. He still believed in Wei Mengru. After all, in terms of investigation ability alone, Wei Mengru was the best among the monks in the god-refining realm. In modern times, a maid would probably be a female investigator wearing tight clothes and with a sexy figure. "Do you suspect that I am being followed?" Wei Mengru asked. "Doubtful, but I believe what you said, but I still feel strange." Musian smiled and said, "If this man in black robe doesn't come out to see me today, I should wonder if he has any back UPS, or maybe I don't value you at all." Wei Mengru's eyes flashed slightly, with a thoughtful look on her face. "The 100,000 spirit stones should have been given to the Gongsun family as well, right?" Wei Mengru suddenly asked coldly. Wei Mengru, who had been following Musian, naturally knew about the 100,000 spirit stones. Even in Wei Mengru's view, the number of 100,000 spirit stones is already quite astonishing. Now that Mr. Huang has sent all 100,000 spirit stones to the Mu family, she can't understand the other party's thoughts. 100,000 spiritual stones are only given to our Mu family and have nothing to do with the Gongsun family, Musian said. "You mean, Chinexai Chamber of Commerce will send spirit stones to the Gongsun family again in the future?" "I don't know about that. If Mr. Huang is smart, he shouldn't do that." Musian smiled and continued, "Businessmen are thrifty, but big businessmen have a strategic vision, can look to the future, and are willing to spend small money to make big money. He only gave this money to our Mu family, which shows that he thinks highly of us. In Mr. Wang's eyes, the Gongsun family is at most a force on the same level as himself, so there is no need to give money. And, regardless of whether Mr. Wang's 100,000 spirit stones have a share for the Gongsun family, we will treat it as if there is no share, that is, there is no share." Musian continued. Wei Mengru glanced at him and whispered, "Are you going to embezzle it?" "How can this be called embezzlement, Sister Mengru?" Musian turned his head to look at Wei Mengru, and happened to meet the eyes of the maid. He showed a gentle smile and said, "This is what we earned with our efforts. How can the cost of suppressing bandits be called embezzlement? This should be called confiscation." At this moment, Mr. Huang was sitting in the hall with his legs crossed and drinking tea leisurely. Beside him, the beautiful woman looked unhappy, drinking tea and sighing from time to time. She looked sad. "Why are you sighing beside me?" Mr. Huang had to speak, looking at his wife. "Master, you said that we gave these 100,000 spirit stones to the Mu family, and we didn't get any benefits. How long will it take to earn it back?" Madame Huang sighed, her eyes full of pain. "Why can't we get any benefits?" Mr. Huang changed his leg and looked at Madame Huang strangely, saying, "Now someone is hindering our business, we have to solve the obstacles to continue to make money. If we don't give these 100,000 spirit stones, we may have to give more in the future." Mr. Huang continued. The beautiful woman's eyes flickered slightly, and she couldn't help but look at her master twice more. However, Master Huang did not intend to explain, but changed the subject and said, "Have you asked the servants to notify Mr. Tian?" The beautiful woman nodded gently and said, "Mr. Tian agreed to go to Longshao Forest together tomorrow, but Master, why do we have to work hard after paying the money?" Master Huang glanced at his wife, shook his head, and sighed, "We gave away this money, and we lost it. But in the next 1 or 2 months, they will still spit it out little by little and return to our pockets, so in the end we still make money." Seeing that the beautiful woman seemed to understand, Master Huang did not explain again, but just tapped the edge of the chair with his knuckles, looked forward, and fell into thought. Time passed unknowingly for most of the day, and as Musian expected, the black-robed man finally came to the Mu family that night. No. Now he can't be called the black-robed man, because since the last time the Gongsun family offered a reward for the capture of the black-robed man, he has not worn a black robe again. Changed to a plain robe and a hat. "Master Mu, are you sure tomorrow?" The black-robed man stared at Musian with a pair of cold eyes under his hat. Obviously, he already knew how Musian tricked Yayu into the Dragon Head Forest. Musian smiled and said, "Does winning or losing matter?" If Musian had not awakened his memory and it was just a simple competition, then it would probably be Musian provoking Yayu, and then being slapped in the face by the protagonist. However, now, this game has nothing to do with Yayu from beginning to end. No matter how strong and unpredictable the chosen son is, no matter how lucky he is, being able to cross levels and fight against the chi training cultivators is already the limit. As for the next level of the refining spirit realm, the distance between refining essence and refining spirit is like that between an elephant and an ant, with no room for maneuver at all. Even the protagonist can't do it. The black-robed man sneered and said, "That's true. Then look forward to tomorrow's performance, Master Mew." After the black-robed man finished speaking, he turned into black mist and disappeared in the room. After Musian watched the black-robed man disappear from his sight, he turned his head to look at the shadow in the corner. In the shadow, he could vaguely see a graceful figure and a huge human heart. "Are you sure?" Wei Mengru asked. Musian shook his head. "I just said that winning or losing is not important." "In the end, you are not sure," Wei Mengru heard Musian's voice over. "Then yeah, you should have a trump card," she reminded. "I know, but I also have a trump card." Musian looked serious. "What?" Wei Mengru's eyes were confused. She thought she knew the young master very well, but she had never heard of any trump cards he had. Musian waved at her, mysteriously, "This is a secret." The girl in the yellow skirt fluttered her skirt and walked over slowly. She looked at the boy sitting at the head of the bed and asked, "What trump card?" Musian whispered something, but the voice was so small that people could not hear it at all. Wei Mengru frowned slightly and leaned close to his ear. At this time, Musian leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Don't you still have me?" His warm breath gently sprayed on the maid's crystal earlobe, and in the dim light, it was clear that her earlobe was slightly hot. The maid finally realized that this frivolous guy was teasing her. She glanced at Musian with a cold look and said, "Relying on others is not a trump card, it's just eating gigolo." Although the tone was still cold, there was a faint blush on her face. "What's wrong with eating gigolo?" "It's good," Musian smiled. Not only did he want to eat Wei Mengru's soft rice, if possible, he also wanted to hug senior sister Ian's thigh tomorrow. No words were spoken that night. The next morning, the people of Tianqian City were still living their own lives, but they had no idea that at this moment, the Dragon Head Forest was already full of murderous intentions. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 37. Dragon Head Forest. This forest is located on the west side of Tianqian City. If you look down at the entire forest, you will find that the shape of the forest is exactly the shape of a dragon head. There are many monsters in the forest, and ordinary people dare not approach it at all. But sometimes there are cultivators who step into the forest to hunt monsters to obtain the materials they need, so many cultivators die here every year. Yayu, wearing a black robe, stood in front of the entrance of the forest, staring at the slowly approaching carriage in front of him. He recognized the carriage. It was the people of the Mew family. "Is it finally here?" Yayu took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, his eyes filled with an inextinguishable war. For this day, he has waited too long. He has never slept well in the past few nights. Every time he returned to the room, he began to practice, in order to narrow the gap with Musian as soon as possible. And, revenge. Although he was not sure, Musian was not a normal chi training cultivator. He had been drained of his body by beauty in the past 2 years. As long as he dealt with it calmly and carefully, it would not be a difficult task. When Yayu thought of this, he raised his head again. A handsome boy jumped off the carriage. He had black hair and looked a little weak from the outside, giving people a gentle feeling like a boy next door. However, this was just Musian's disguise. This guy was just a useless young master who was addicted to beauty. No matter how well he disguised himself now, he could not change this fact. Deal with him calmly, and then step on him. Yeah, you just had this thought and was about to speak. But before he could speak, he saw Musian circled around, came to the other side of the carriage, and stretched out his hand. In the carriage, a slender white hand gently rested on Musian's palm, and then she lifted the curtain, stepping on a pair of white cloth boots. Her skirt reached her knees, revealing her slender and straight legs like white jade. The side profile was white and flawless, with 2 strands of hair gently resting on her face on both sides, and a pair of beautiful eyes like peach blossoms. It was Bairuoxi who had made the young talents of Tianqian City obsessed in the past. She obviously also noticed Yayu's gaze in the distance, but she just glanced at it lightly and then retracted her gaze. This indifferent attitude hurt Yayu's heart even more. From beginning to end, Bairuoxi had never given him a good face, but in the past, Bairuoxi had never given Musian a good face either. However, now she seemed to be humble and pleasing to Musian, and even let him hold her hand. Yayu's fists clenched quietly, and the anger in his heart was almost uncontrollable. He didn't even notice that his nails were embedded in his palms. Musian, he finally spoke, staring at Musian with anger that was hard to conceal. Well, he seemed anxious. Musian saw everything, but didn't care. Let Bairuoxi wait near the carriage, and then walk slowly, observing this handsome boy. In fact, not only Yayu, Musian was also waiting for this day. Get rid of the protagonist, the damn supporting role on his interface should turn gray or even disappear, right? But he was not as anxious as Yayu. In the final analysis, he had seen it very openly from the beginning. If the talent and luck of this protagonist were really strong and unstoppable, he would just lie down and be done with it. Anyway, enjoy more when you lie down, enjoy all the things that should be enjoyed first, at least it won't be a waste of the strip. If he happens to win, that would be even better. Get rid of Yayu, the title of supporting role will disappear, and he can become the protagonist of the new world. Relying on the huge resources of the Mu family to advance to the peak of Qi refining, and then go to Lianji sect, you may be able to become an emperor in the future. Of course, the premise is to ensure that the protagonist in front of you can be solved first. You came really early, Musian said with a smile. Yayu stared at Musian with cold eyes and ignored him. Musian looked at the calm appearance of the young man and continued, I chatted with Ruoxi for a few more words last night, and accidentally a night passed. Yayu's face was dark. It's just an intimate exchange between a vain woman and a playboy of the Mu family. What does it have to do with me? Musian smiled, she just doesn't like you, how can she be vain? Could it be that women have to revolve around you? Stop talking so hypocritically. Why did she choose you? Don't you know? Yayu's voice suddenly rose a few degrees. Musian shook his head and smiled, you said before that Miss Bai broke off the engagement and insulted you, but that was a childhood engagement arranged by the previous generation, and she had no choice at all. After breaking off the engagement, pursuing your own feelings became vanity. Musian continued, also, Master Ye, you seem to have forgotten what Ruoxi's attitude towards me was at the beginning. This chosen son with great luck did not seem to realize that he had any problems. In his opinion, breaking off the engagement was unforgivable, and Bairuoxi should marry into the Ye family as a fiancé. And Bairuoxi should not be so cold to him. In the final analysis, Yayu just regarded Bairuoxi as his own private property and thought that the world should revolve around him. He did not think about why Bairuoxi would reject him. Master Ye, if you beat me today, who would Ruoxi choose? Musian killed people and hurt their hearts. Yayu could no longer bear it. The next moment, he took a step forward. Judging from the speed, he was comparable to a cultivator of the second level of Qi training. If Musian had not crushed the spiritual energy of tens of thousands of spirit stones last night and took it for himself, facing Yayu's amazing speed, it would have been really difficult. Musian raised his hand and slapped it in the air, and a wave of air rushed towards Yayu. Third level of Qi training. A trace of surprise flashed across Yayu's eyes, but he did not hold back on the speed of his feet. He accelerated his potential to the extreme and pulled the energy of his fingers. Clang! The heavy sword behind him flew out, and he grasped the hilt of the sword and slashed at Musian. This attack was unexpected, but Musian had already been on guard and also drew his sword across his body. When the sound of the weapons colliding rang out, a wave of air spread out with the two as the center. The advantage in realm was revealed at this moment. Musian exuded the pressure that only the Qi training realm had. He pulled the Qi, and the spiritual energy around him turned into several sharp blades and rushed towards Yayu. Yayu's face changed slightly, and the Qi of heaven in his body circulated rapidly. It seemed that a thin film appeared on his body, and those spiritual blades that attacked him were quietly dissolved and quietly drifted between heaven and earth. Musian's face showed no emotion, and he did not give Yayu a chance to breathe, and swung his sword to cut Yayu again. But Yayu's speed was too fast. Whenever Musian's sword blade was about to hit Yayu, his speed would speed up like a ghost and avoid the attack. Although the spiritual energy of the cultivators in the Qi training realm is much larger than that of the cultivators in the Jing refining realm, Yayu avoided several consecutive fierce attacks, and even Musian was a little overwhelmed. Bairuoxi stood not far away, frowning and looking at this scene, looking at Yayu with a little surprise. Although he is only in the refining essence realm, Yayu's body movements and speed are almost the same as those in the refining Qi realm. Dad is right, Yayu is indeed a genius. However, no matter how talented he is, it has nothing to do with her. She broke off the engagement not simply because Yayu became a waste, but because she didn't like this marriage. As Yayu dodged another sword, Musian's face became much paler than before. The price of indulging in beauty in the past is now reflected. After launching several consecutive attacks, Musian's physical strength was greatly consumed. Yayu was also pale, with sweat on his forehead and heavy breathing. He stared at Musian and said slowly, "It seems that the cultivators in the Qi training realm are just like this." "No," Yayu shook his head again and said lightly, "you are just exhausted by beauty. If I were fighting a real cultivator in the Qi training realm, it would not be so easy." The flat tone, coupled with a faint smile that seemed to be a little disdainful, would probably have been angry if an ordinary person had seen it. However, Musian still smiled and said, "That's right. In the past, being obsessed with beauty did affect my normal performance. And chatting with Ruoxi all night last night did consume too much energy." Yayu's eyes suddenly widened, and the last sentence completely broke his defense. The spiritual energy that was almost exhausted actually surged into his body like a rising tide. Musian looked carefully and saw Yayu taking out a pill from his pocket and swallowing it. Yayu raised his head suddenly, and his pale face had regained some redness. "Master Mu, I forgot to tell you that my other identity is an alchemist. In addition to practicing these days, he also prepared a lot of medicinal materials to refine pills for the battle with Musian today." Yayu stepped back, and the whole person seemed to turn into a stream of light and attacked Musian. With a hint of cruelty in his eyes, the heavy sword in his hand mercilessly slashed at Musian. Facing the enemy, showing mercy will only leave yourself with greater hidden dangers. Yayu is going to kill him. In the distance, Bairuoxi saw the murderous intent bursting out of Yayu. She subconsciously pinched the hem of her skirt and stared at Musian. The spiritual energy on her body was surging slowly, and her thin white skirt was gently lifted up with the spiritual energy. Musian's condition was too bad now. If he was not stopped, he might really die. However, at this moment, Bairuoxi suddenly noticed something wrong. Not only Yayu, but Musian's spiritual energy which had been exhausted, was also slowly recovering, and the recovery speed was much faster than Yayu. Yayu's sword was deflected by Musian's sword. The two long swords fell to the ground at the same time, and Musian punched Yayu's abdomen. A wave of air penetrated his abdomen, and the leaves of the big tree behind him trembled, startling the birds in the forest. Yayu flew backwards and hit the tree roots behind him heavily. He spurted out a mouthful of blood, raised his head with difficulty, stared at Musian in disbelief, but saw that he opened his mouth. In Musian's mouth, there was a Huiwen pill that had just been refined not long ago. Master Ye, since when did you have the illusion that you have a recovery pill? Musian said calmly. Huiwen pill. Yayu covered his chest and stared at Musian, his eyes full of disbelief. As an alchemist, he naturally knew the value of Huiwen pill. Even the Mu family couldn't find the Beast King vine, but what Musian is taking now is Huiwen pill. Behind him, Bairuoxi stepped forward and whispered, "Are you okay?" Musian shook his head and said, "I'm a little luckier, I'm okay." As he spoke, he glanced at Bairuoxi again, and stayed on her beautiful face for a moment. He just thought of something very interesting. If he hadn't stopped Yayu from buying the bronze piece at the auction house that day, would Yayu now be able to use the bronze sword? According to speculation, the bronze sword is very likely to have been passed down by the ancestors of the Bai family. However, Yayu is the chosen son of heaven. Judging from Yayu's desire for the bronze piece at that time, he is very likely to be able to activate the power of the bronze piece. If that were the case, the person standing now would not be Musian, but Yayu. Because the bronze sword that Bairuoxi sacrificed at that time, when there was only one piece, its power was comparable to that of a cultivator at the peak of Qi training. When the two pieces were combined, the destructive power reached that of a cultivator at the realm of refining spirit. Isn't this the growth-oriented technique exclusively for the protagonist? Thanks to my being a Krypton Gold player, no matter how lucky Yayu, the seal, is, as long as I have money, I will be the only one who can finally take the bronze piece. Musian sighed in his heart, silently watching the boy who got up again and took a few pills. Bairuoxi frowned slightly and said softly, "Enough, Yayu. There is no deep hatred between you, there is no need to fight to the death, this competition is over." And Yayu showed a faint smile on his face, and when he raised his head again, there was a strange luster in his dark eyes. In the battle with Musian just now, the old man sleeping in his body was also awakened. As long as he took action, let alone Musian, even if Musian and Bairuoxi took action together, they would not be his opponent. Although the old man was seriously injured, his current strength is at least at the level of refining spirit. "Leave it to you, Master," Yayu whispered in his heart. The old man's laughing voice sounded in Yayu's ear, saying, "If I take action, I can't guarantee the safety of the little kid. Have you thought it through?" Yayu had no expression on his face, just nodded in response. At that moment, a terrifying aura different from the one just now burst out from his body. The pressure of the aura made the monsters in the forest wail in fear, and the sound of birds in the jungle was endless. Bairuoxi frowned and whispered, "Be careful, he is weird." Musian chuckled and said, "It's right to be weird, if he is not weird, I will think it's weird. After all, he is the chosen one. In this day and age, how can you be called the protagonist without some golden fingers or plug-ins? However, once the supporting role has IQ, there will be no 1v1 drama of being defeated by the protagonist." Musian raised his head and saw Yayu standing a distance away from him. He smiled and said, "Changed." Yayu said slowly, "This is also one of my trump cards. Don't blame me, Master Mu. As long as Musian can be dealt with, it is worth it no matter what." Musian nodded and agreed, "That's right. Anyway, the result is the most important. As long as you can win, it's enough. As for whether the process is cheating, it doesn't matter. Seeing Yayu slowly stepping forward, Musian suddenly changed his tone and said, "But, Master Ye, haven't you considered one thing?" Yayu paused slightly and frowned. For some reason, he felt uneasy in his heart. He stared at Musian expressionlessly, with murderous intent bursting out of his body. He stepped forward and raised his hand to grab Musian. Musian still stood still and said calmly, "Why do you have the illusion that no matter what realm you are in, only enemies of the same realm will bother you? Times have changed, Master Ye." Almost at the moment when the voice fell, Yayu felt an unprecedented sense of crisis coming from mid-air. He looked up suddenly, only to find that a mysterious man wearing a bamboo hat fell from mid-air and threw out a chain. There was no room for any reaction at all, and the chain quickly bound Yayu. The chain quickly bound Yayu, and the dark light completely enveloped Yayu in it, as if forming a cocoon. Then, a ball emitting milky white light slowly floated out of the cocoon. "Heavenly Chi! My heavenly Chi, who are you? Who are you?" Yayu's terrified roar came from the cocoon. He never thought that his heavenly Chi would actually run out of his body. It had obviously chosen him, so why did it run out by itself? "Your heavenly Chi." The black-robed man sneered, "You are just a little more lucky than ordinary people. Are you worthy of possessing heavenly Chi? Heavenly Chi will only choose the people with the best luck. Your luck is very good, but it is only in Tianqian City." The black-robed man stretched out a pale hand from his robe and grabbed the heavenly Chi hanging in the air. "The person who really should possess the heavenly Chi should be me." As if he was stating a fact, the black-robed man's tone was indifferent. As he reached out, the heavenly Chi in the shape of a sphere emitted a faint light, as if resisting the black-robed man. However, the black-robed man seemed to have been prepared. He took out another jade-mouthed bottle and sucked the heavenly Chi directly into the bottle. All this happened in a flash. Bairuoxi didn't react at all, just looking at this scene, a little stunned. The black-robed man turned his head to look at the slightly pale boy standing not far away, showed a sneer, and said, "Thank you for your cooperation, Master Mu." Although his face was still a little pale, Musian still smiled gently. "This is the reward agreed at the beginning, there is no cooperation or not." The black-robed man nodded slightly and said, "Master Mu is indeed a trustworthy person." He changed his voice and continued, "So, I decided to give Master Mu a surprise." When he said this, the black-robed man's eyes had a hint of cruelty. "Oh." Musian showed a hint of surprise on his face, puzzled. "Surprise, what is it?" "The surprise is that Musian secretly asked Yayu to compete in Longshao Forest, but he killed Yayu for Bairuoxi, raped the daughter of the Bai family, and finally died tragically in a beast tied in Longshao Forest." The black-robed man said sinisterly. "You want to frame me?" Musian showed a fearful look. The black-robed man showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth and was about to speak. At this time, Musian suddenly changed the subject and said, "Then I will give you a surprise, how about it?" So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 38. When Musian finished speaking, the man in black robe was shocked. Then, when he saw the old man quietly appearing behind Musian, he hesitated for a moment, and then, the uneasiness slowly subsided, and he sneered. "The so-called surprise refers to him. The guest of the Mu family, Mr. Ren. This is the card of the Mu family, and it is also the card in the intelligence of the man in black robe. And the card to deal with this old man, he has already prepared it. A cultivator in the realm of refining spirits is indeed troublesome. But it is not difficult. At least for him who has been prepared, this is not a troublesome matter." The black-robed man regained his composure, staring at Musian with a deep chill in his eyes, and slowly said, "The guest of the Mu family actually escorted you all the way to the Dragon Head Forest. It seems that Master Mu doesn't trust me very much." Musian looked at the black-robed man as if he was looking at a lunatic, and said, "Would you trust an outsider who doesn't even want to reveal his name?" The black-robed man was obviously stunned, and then burst into laughter. "That's right, ha ha ha, I have always regarded you as a useless young master obsessed with beauty. It seems that I underestimated you too much. Even a useless young master knows how to make a comprehensive plan. I worked so hard to let you chase Miss by, Master Mew really doesn't know how to be grateful. The girl I chased and the thoughts I spent, how can it be your credit?" Musian laughed. "Who are you sending it to?" The black-robed man had a hint of coldness in his eyes, and he slowly raised his hand. "It seems that Master Mew is not very satisfied with the surprise I just gave you." As soon as the words fell, the black-robed man burst out with an astonishing murderous intent. Musian suddenly felt a chill on his back, and he stared at the black-robed man. The figure of the black-robed man suddenly twisted, and then, from behind the black-robed man, a mysterious man in a black robe slowly walked out. Unlike the man wearing a bamboo hat, he was still wearing a black robe, exuding a cold breath, and a pair of cold vertical pupils like a venomous snake. Just at first glance, people felt as if they were looking at a beast, which was chilling. "Monster," Byruoxi almost blurted out. The breath exuded by this black-robed man was the cold breath that only monsters could have. Monsters, in this fairy world, one of the strongest monster forces, Lianji sect is located in Dongzhou, while the kingdom of monsters is in Bizhu. There have been constant border frictions between the two sides. But Tianqian city is not far from the foot of Lianji sect. There are monsters infiltrating even here. It seems that the Monster King has big plans. Bizhu can be said to be a complete monster kingdom, where demons are dancing wildly, and their queen is said to be a giant python swallowing the sky in ancient times. Her body is a white snake, charming all living beings, and countless monsters and evil cultivators bow down to her pomegranate skirt and are willing to be a dog at her feet. Not only because of the strength of the queen, on the other hand, it is also related to her own charm ability. No wonder I always feel that this guy looks a little bit wrong. It turns out to be a monster. Musian's eyes flashed a trace of surprise for the first time. The other party is indeed reserved. From beginning to end, there is more than one black-robed man. This is why the black-robed man can be so confident. Two cultivators in the refining spirit realm, even if Elder Ren of the Mu family can stop one, the destructive power brought by the other cultivator in the refining spirit realm can be said to be overwhelming. Monsters are born with rich spiritual energy. Because of the advantage of bloodline, cultivators of the same realm are no match at all, not to mention that from the surface, apart from Elder Ren, there are only Musian and Byruoxi. Two cultivators in the Qi refining spirit realm are not enough to resist the demon cultivators in the refining spirit realm. Master Mu seemed not surprised enough just now, so, is this surprise enough now? The black-robed man spoke slowly, with a hint of teasing in his eyes. That cold look was like the teasing of a cat catching a mouse. That's true. Under normal circumstances, even a large family can't produce 2 or 3 cultivators in the refining spirit realm. The 2 high-grade demon cultivators in the refining spirit realm in front of them are enough to sweep everything in the current environment. When he said this, the black-robed man's eyes fell on Byruoxi on the side intentionally or unintentionally, and there was a hint of greed in his cold eyes. Although he had no interest in humans, this girl had such a strong spiritual energy. If he could refine it into a cauldron, it would be able to improve his strength a lot. As for Musian, later, I will let this kid who deserves a beating experience what it means to be worse than death. A cultivator in the refining spirit realm was actually plotted against by a kid in the refining Qi realm before, which led to everyone shouting and beating him when he walked on the street, and he even dared not wear a black robe on the street again. This great revenge cannot be swallowed without revenge. 2 demon cultivators in the refining spirit realm, really surprised me a little. Musian looked at the 2 black-robed people in front of him and sighed sincerely. But the originally terrified look has gradually disappeared, and his tone has returned to his usual calmness. The black-robed man frowned inadvertently. For some reason, he suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. He imagined Musian's reaction when he discovered two demon cultivators in the spirit-refining realm: fear, terror, or even turning around and running away on the spot. People who faced him in the past would react in this way, and he would first give the other party a little hope, let the other party think that he could escape from his palm, and then wait until the end, and then catch him back. At this moment, he gave the other party the greatest sense of despair. He wanted to see Musian make this reaction, but at this time, the other party's expression was so indifferent that it made people feel a little palpitation. Something is not right. It is obviously just a little ghost of the third level of Qi training. Why is there no fear at all? The black-robed man's eyes flickered slightly. And almost at that moment, the demon cultivator accomplice beside him raised his hand and slapped Musian. Ren Lao snorted coldly, and slapped out the same palm through the air. The air wave spread out in the turbulent surroundings, and the two quickly distanced themselves. The black-robed evil cultivator's body surged with amazing demonic energy, covering Ren Lao, and the two sides started a fierce battle. The black-robed man was still confronting Musian. Seeing that Musian still had no signs of escaping, for some reason, he suddenly felt timid in his heart, and his eyes flickered slightly. It is more important to bring the heavenly Qi back to Her Majesty the Queen now. If the mission fails, it will be troublesome. The black-robed man thought of this, but he was still unwilling. His pale and dry palm stretched out from his robe and slapped Musian fiercely. Clang! A crisp and pleasant buzzing sound came to his ears. The black-robed man looked closely and found that the eldest lady of the Bai family, who was also only in the Qi training realm, had an ancient bronze sword with extremely complex patterns behind her. A palpitating sense of oppression emanated from the bronze sword. The inviolable sense of majesty made the black-robed man's pupils shrink slightly. This bronze sword is a bit strange. The black-robed man stared at Bairuoxi. Although he was shocked and angry in his heart, he was still calm on the surface. He just slowly said, "So that's it? Is this your confidence, Master Mu? After all, you still have to rely on a woman," he said sarcastically with a somewhat sarcastic tone. Musian was not annoyed, but smiled calmly. "I have a woman to rely on. What about you?" "Oh, you don't have a Taoist partner, that's fine." Musian's words broke the black-robed man's defense. The black-robed man's eyes burst with murderous intent, and he punched again. But Bairuoxi's bronze sword was placed in front of the two of them. With a clang, the bronze sword formed a protective shield, isolating all attacks. "It looks a bit like the anger of a single dog," Musian smiled. "Don't be so anxious, the surprise I just mentioned has not been presented yet." Looking at the young man with a calm smile, the black-robed man's eyes flashed slightly, and he felt more and more that something was wrong in his heart. He turned around immediately and turned into a stream of light and flew towards the air. At this time, a deafening voice like thunder came from under the sky: "Come as you want, leave as you want, what do you think of our Tianqian city?" The black-robed man suddenly raised his head and looked. I don't know when, 3 more monks flying on swords appeared in the air. 2 soul-refining monks of the Gongsun family, and a soul-refining master of the Chenexai Chamber of Commerce. The black-robed man's pupils shrank into pinholes, and he turned around and wanted to escape to the other side. However, the moment he turned his head, he saw a girl in a goose-yellow dress standing there quietly waiting for him. She carried a thin sword on her back, her expression was cold, and her pair of calm eyes were filled with indifference. Another soul-refining monk. At this moment, the man in black robe felt like he had woken up to find himself at the enemy of the whole world. He turned his head and looked at Musian, and said word by word, "You're plotting against me." A young man from the Mu family could actually secretly unite the 3 major families. No one would have thought of this. This is not called plotting against you. According to what you just said, This is called a surprise. Musian said word by word, now I want you to explain it again dash. What exactly is the surprise you are talking about? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 39. The surprise is naturally that the monks at the God-refining realm eliminated harm to the people, killed the men in black robes, and restored the purity of Tianqian city. Gongsun Xiang laughed loudly, and his voice was like thunder, resounding throughout the sky. Not only did you attack the head of the Bai family, you also secretly suppressed the Bai family. You even pretended to be a member of the Gongsun family and ransacked the house a while ago and took away all the treasures you got. What crime should you, a demon cultivator, deserve? Gongsun Xiang continued to question. Instead of being angry, the man in black robe smiled and said, is your Gongsun family responsible for making money? Now you plan to blame all the dirty water on me. The Gongsun family has never amassed money, and they have no intention of amassing money. Everything was done by the men in black robes. Gongsun Xiang put his hands behind his back and looked down at the black-robed man on the ground with an extremely indifferent tone. Beside him, a guest from the Gongsun family looked down at the black-robed man on the ground with the same indifferent expression. Next to Gongsun Xiang, another old man who looked a little older stood in the air and spoke slowly, since I have been hired by the Chinexai Chamber of Commerce, there is no reason to fish in troubled waters at this time. At least I should make some efforts. In the cocoon, Yayu, who barely regained consciousness, seemed to understand everything. He roared in the dark cocoon. Musian, are you kidding me? At this moment, Yayu finally came to his senses. He felt extremely humiliated. From the beginning to the end, Musian had never regarded him as an opponent. The battle with him just now was just an insignificant appetizer before a big meal. From the beginning, Musian didn't take him seriously. Even Musian didn't care about winning or losing. He is a person who truly puts interests first. From the beginning to the end, Musian's only goal is the man in black robe. Boom. The next moment, three figures in mid-air turned into afterimages and fell together. In the distance, Wei Mengru also turned into afterimages to kill the man in black robe. All the monks in the God-refining realm took action together. When Gongsun Xiang raised his hand, an invisible heat wave hit the black-robed man and enveloped him. The movement of the man in black robe who was about to dodge was obviously delayed, as if every time he moved, his speed was twice as slow as that of an ordinary person. But the man in black robe was obviously a master who knew how to fight in a group. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Gongsun Xiang, then dodged towards Gongsun Xiang in mid-air and killed him. He stretched out his right hand, and a dark chain burst out from his sleeve, wrapping Gongsun Xiang around him. That chain is absorbing the spiritual energy from Gongsun Xiangding's furnace. Gongsun Xiang struggled hard and roared, if we don't take action, we might all die here together. Mr. Tian, the guest of the Chinexai Chamber of Commerce, no longer hesitated, and took this opportunity to take action. Although he was nearly 50 years old, when he punched the black-robed man firmly on the head, it made the black-robed man's head buzz. The whole person flew out uncontrollably, blasting a huge hole in the ground. The chains that bound Gongsun Xiang were then released. Gongsun Xiangzhou lowered his head and stared at the man in the pit, a chill flashed across his eyes, and he raised his hand to wave out a wave of heat. A huge mark was blasted out of the ground, and the black-robed man's body was severely pressed into the ground in the twisted heat wave. His palm subconsciously let go, and the jade bottle that sealed the air of heaven flew out. Landed in a nearby jungle. Wei Mengru pointed the finger at the man in black robe, the sound of the sword being unsheathed was clear and sweet, and the tip of the sword stabbed towards the chest of the man in black robe, delivering a fatal blow. But at this moment, another accomplice who was fighting fiercely with Mr. Ren in the distance suddenly punched the sword blade from the air. The terrifying air wave came with the pressure, and the sword tip was about to hit the man in black robe. At that time, it was deflected under the influence of air waves, and was nailed into the ground during the rotation. Gong Soon Seong gasped and took a pill. While waiting for his spiritual energy to recover, he stared at the man in black robe. The chain that the man in black robe just released can actually absorb the spiritual energy of others, which is really weird. And, it's clear that I didn't absorb much spiritual energy just now, so why is my body so exhausted now? Could it be that these days with Bai Yuan Feng? In the pit, the man in black robe stood up from the rubble with difficulty. It should be said that he is indeed a rough-skinned demon cultivator. Even though he was surrounded by 4 God-refining realm cultivators, he was still vigorous at this moment. He dusted himself off, glanced at Musian beside him, grinned, and sneered, "You really gave me a big surprise, Master Mu." He was clearly on the passive side, but his expression remained unchanged, and his eyes were even full of confidence. This made everyone present feel that something was wrong. Musian frowned slightly and stared at the man in black robe. "I'm afraid you don't know, right? The Qi of Heavenly Dao can not only speed up one's cultivation. If it is temporarily refined, it can even increase the realm by a level in a short period of time. Also, only people with great luck can be recognized by the Qi of Heaven, and I am this person with great luck." The man in black robe stretched out his palm and shouted, "Get up." The jade bottle in the distance flew up quietly. The jade bottle is exquisitely crafted, with complex pattern formations engraved on its surface. Obviously, this is the jade bottle that the man in black robe had prepared long ago for the purpose of sealing the energy of heaven. But now, the seal of the jade bottle has been released. In the jade bottle, a milky white ball of light floated quietly between heaven and earth. Musian's eyes narrowed slightly and he said in a deep voice, "Don't let him swallow the energy of heaven." Boom. Relying on the old man in his body, Yu finally broke free from the black cocoon. His eyes were immediately attracted by the aura of heaven, and there was a trace of eagerness in his eyes. He stretched out his right hand and said, "Come back to me quickly." Come. However, the Qi of Heavenly Dao was just floating in the air, but there was no movement at all. The man in black robe sneered, "I have said before that the Qi of Heaven will only choose people with great luck. You are just lucky enough to get the Qi of Heaven, but it does not mean that your luck is really better than others." You seemed to find it difficult to believe this fact, and a trace of shock and anger flashed in his eyes. With the old man in his body attached to him, his state had actually reached the realm of refining gods. He stepped forward and grabbed the heavenly energy in mid-air. The man in black robe snorted coldly, and a dark chain suddenly shot out from his sleeve, intercepting Yu in mid-air. The Qi of Heavenly Dao, this is a good thing. Gong Soon Seong's eyes flashed slightly, with unconcealable greed in his eyes, and he grabbed the Qi of Heavenly Dao. Mr. Tian stepped in front of Gong Soon Seong and said with a smile, "Brother Gong Soon, although this heavenly energy is good, it can only be obtained by people with great luck. Don't be so impatient." Gong Soon Seong stared at the old man and said coldly, "Get out of the way." Mr. Tian didn't make any move, he still smiled and said, "First deal with the enemy, the owner of the Qi of Heaven, and then we will decide." The internal strife now is exactly what he wants to see. Gong Soon Seong pondered for a moment, nodded and said, "Okay." He naturally knew that the key thing now was to prevent the man in black robe from swallowing the energy of heaven. No one knew how strong the other party would become after swallowing the energy of heaven. The 3 masters came out and attacked the man in black robe. The man in black robe had no choice but to turn his attention away from the Qi of heaven, because, in addition to the 3 monks in the God-refining realm in front of him, there was also Wei Mengru on the ground who was waiting to give him a fatal blow at any time. However, at this time, Yayu stepped on the ground with the sole of his foot, and his whole body flew towards the heavenly energy in mid-air like a cannonball. The three people who were fighting with the man in black were distracted for a moment. That idiot, Gong Soon Seong cursed in his heart, pulled away from the battle, and stood in front of Yayu. Everyone was trying their best to get rid of the men in black robes, but Yayu played a clever trick and wanted to take this opportunity to take away the chi of heaven. Did he treat them as fools? Yayu, retreat quickly, Gong Soon Seong said in a deep voice. Yayu stared at Gong Sung Seong with extremely calm eyes and said, "This is my thing, senior, please get out of the way." Gong Soon Seong sneered, "If it is your thing, why doesn't it want to recognize you as its master now?" Yayu paused for a moment, his face suddenly became colder, and he said, "The demon cultivator just now must have done something. The chi of heaven has recognized me as the master a long time ago." The cold laughter of the man in black came from the distance. "Ha ha ha, what are you talking about? No one can make the chi of heaven recognize its master. It will only choose people with great luck. It's just that it doesn't think you are the best choice, that's why I didn't go back to find you." He wished that these people would start fighting among themselves, which would also give him a chance to fish in troubled waters. Obviously, the temptation of the chi of heaven is too great. Now these monks are holding back because they all hope to reserve their strength to compete for the chi of heaven in the future. Yayu said in a deep voice, "Since the senior refuses to get out of the way, the junior can only offend." After finishing speaking, Yayu's whole temperament quietly changed. Gong Soon Seong's eyes narrowed slightly. There seems to be another soul in Yayu's body, and now, that soul is controlling his body. "Who are you?" Gong Soon Seong asked. But Yayu did not speak, but rushed towards the direction of the Daochi. Gong Soon Seong stopped in front of Yayu and slashed at Yayu with his flying sword. Yayu raised his hand slightly, blocked the flying sword, and said slowly, "Now a mere monk in the god-refining realm dares to fight against me. He is really formidable." His voice was extremely old, and although his face was delicate, his cloudy eyes showed the vicissitudes of the world. Gong Soon Seong sneered and said, "No matter what glory my predecessor had in the past, you are just a remnant soul now. It's true that you can achieve the realm of refining gods while attached to Yayu's body, but how long can you last?" Yayu glanced at Gong Soon Seong slightly and said calmly, "You will know after you try it." The black-robed man's chains were aimed at Yayu's soul, so the old man in Yayu's body had little to do, but facing other monks, he could still compete with them. Yayu raised his right hand, and blazing fire rose quietly in his palm. Gong Soon Seong's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the flames in Yayu's palms. He didn't dare to look down on it. He restrained his energy and adjusted himself to the best condition. Whoosh! At this time, Yayu suddenly moved, and the flames in his palms blasted out towards Gong Sung Seong. A violent collision broke out in mid-air, and the sound of explosions exploded in my ears. Musian looked at the chaotic scene and frowned for the first time. If it weren't for Yayu, the man in black robe should have been eliminated by now. If 4 cultivators from the god-refining realm come out together, even the demon cultivators will die violently. But because of Yayu's obstruction and the temptation of heavenly Daochi, the situation is now a little more delicate. However, all this is not out of his control. Musian raised his head slightly and looked at the chi of heaven floating in the air, and then looked at the distant sky. He was waiting for someone. If nothing unexpected happened, that person should be here soon. At this time, Byruoxi gently pulled the corner of Musian's clothes. She hesitated and said in a voice transmission, "Master Mu, the chi of heaven seems to have some sense of me." Musian was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously turned his head to look at the girl, staring at her beautiful eyes. "Really?" Byruoxi nodded gently. In order to confirm her words, she raised her fingertips slightly, and at this time, the chi of heaven in the air immediately moved slowly towards the direction of Bairuoxi's fingertips. Musian was silent for a while, staring silently at Bairuoxi's beautiful face. Could it be that she is the one with great luck? But if so, why did the chi of heaven go to Yayu instead of Bairuoxi before? When Musian thought of this, his eyes subconsciously fell on Bairuoxi's towering chest. On that snow white, a bronze jewelry was quietly placed on the chest. Could it be that because of the integration of the new bronze piece, his own luck has also changed? When Musian thought of this, he looked up at the black-robed man who was surrounded and retreated by 3 people in the air, and then glanced at the other demon cultivator who was also defeated by Wei Mengru and Ren Lao not far away. He made a decision immediately and whispered, "How far can I attract the energy of the heavenly way?" Bairuoxi closed his eyes slightly, sensed for a while, slowly opened his eyes, and whispered, "Within 50 miles, there should be no problem." "Enough." Musian nodded, took Bairuoxi's hand, and whispered, "Follow me." After speaking, he took Bairuoxi and rushed into the depths of the Dragon Head Forest. As the two quietly stepped into the forest, the aura of the heavenly Dao appeared and disappeared in the air, as if ready to run away at any time. The black-robed man noticed the scene at the first time. He looked at the aura of the heavenly Dao with doubt and was about to stop it. But the 3 cultivators of the refining spirit realm attacked together, and the black-robed man had to restrain his thoughts and try his best to fight against the 3 people. After nearly an incense stick of time, another demon cultivator suddenly wailed. The black-robed man turned his head and saw that the demon cultivator had been pierced through the heart by Wei Mengru's sword. Wei Mengru panted violently, but her clear eyes still had no emotion. She pulled out the sword and splashed the blood on the sword on the ground. "Why do you still have the mind to pay attention to other places?" At this time, Tian Lao, a guest of the Morning Light Chamber of Commerce, also seized the opportunity and punched out, smashing the black-robed man from high in the sky into the heart of the earth. A mouthful of blood spurted out of the black-robed man's mouth, and his cold eyes stared at the people in front of him, as if he wanted to remember them all. In the end, the black-robed man also turned into black mist and completely disappeared between heaven and earth. However, they did not notice that in the rolling black mist, a dark poisonous snake was staring at the few people coldly. It spit out its snake tongue, turned around and quietly drilled into the crack in the ground. The bandit suppression operation ended, and the 2 black-robed men ended up defeated. It should be said that they are really worthy of being demon cultivators. Their combat power is quite amazing. Even if several people join forces, they still have some minor injuries and consume a lot of spiritual energy. At this time, the guest of the Gongsun family suddenly noticed something wrong. He glanced at the air with doubt and suddenly exclaimed, "The chi of heaven is gone." Yayu and Gongsun Xiong, who were fighting in the air, stopped fighting at the same time and subconsciously turned their heads to look in the direction not far from their side. Then, the faces of several people showed astonishment. It was not until then that they discovered that the aura of heaven that had just been suspended in the air had disappeared into the forest. Dividing line Don't worry, there will be another big chapter later. The real protagonist is about to appear. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 40. Deep in the Dragon Head Forest. At this moment, Musian had taken Bairuoxi to find a well-hidden cave entrance. After entering the cave, he took out a paper crane from his ring and threw it out of the cave. The paper crane flew out with the glow of the sunset and flew towards the sky. Musian turned his head to look at Bairuoxi and asked, "Can you sense the aura of the heavenly Dao here?" There were many people there just now. If Bairuoxi had taken the aura of the heavenly Dao directly, they might have turned against him immediately and encircled and suppressed Bairuoxi first. At that time, Bairuoxi would have become the target of public criticism. Even if two Mu family cultivators in the refining spirit realm helped, it would only benefit the black-robed man. But here, there would be no such trouble. After all, no one knew who took the aura of the heavenly Deo away. I'll try. After Bairuoxi finished speaking, she closed her eyes slightly. Behind her, a bronze sword quietly appeared, looking ancient and solemn. Almost not long after, Musian felt that there seemed to be a very warm light covering the entire cave. He raised his head slightly and looked, and the ball emitting milky white light was quietly flying into the cave, illuminating the dim cave entrance. It was the Chi of Heaven. She was indeed able to attract the Chi of Heaven. However, the reason should be due to this bronze sword? Musian saw the clue. Rather than saying that Bairuoxi attracted the Chi of Heaven, it was better to say that the bronze sword behind her attracted the Chi of Heaven. Because he could feel that the Chi of Heaven was swirling around the bronze sword behind Bairuoxi, and it looked very intimate with it. At the same time, Bairuoxi slowly opened her eyes and stretched out her palm. The Chi of Heaven quietly fell into her palm, and the warm breath quietly nurtured Bairuoxi's veins. A warm feeling made her squint comfortably. No wonder everyone cares so much about the Chi of Heaven. With this thing, let alone a human, even a pig can advance to the Chi training realm in a few years. This is simply a supreme treasure. Bairuoxi looked at the heavenly Chi in her palm, with a hint of entanglement in her eyes. Finally, she turned around and stretched out her palm to Musian. Master Mu, I have no way to repay your kindness during this period. If you don't mind, you can take this thing. Musian shook his head and did not accept it. Bairuoxi frowned slightly and was about to speak. At this time, Musian continued, this thing is not in a hurry to distribute it now. No matter who has the heavenly Chi in the end, at least you need to take it now. Bairuoxi raised her eyebrows slightly, stared at Musian, and said, why? Musian said, this place is not suitable for explanation. You will understand when you leave the cave. If you delay too long in this place, you will be suspected, and you must leave early. Bairuoxi did not ask further questions. After spending the past few days together, she chose to believe Musian's words. To be honest, if the timing was not right, she would even want to ask Musian what his purpose was. If he didn't even want the Chi of Heaven, what else could make him excited? Bairuoxi thought about this and took a step forward. At this moment, her steps suddenly paused slightly, and she felt a cold sweat on her back. She turned her head suddenly and looked at Musian not far away. A black venomous snake was staring at Musian coldly. A demon in the realm of refining spirits. Bairuoxi's eyes slowly widened, and she hurriedly reached out to grab Musian's shoulder and pulled him back. The bronze sword behind her was unsheathed and stabbed in the direction of the venomous snake. Hiss. The venomous snake spit out its tongue, twisted its body to avoid the attack, and sprayed a stream of venom from its mouth, which hit Bairuoxi's shoulder. Under the gazes of the two, the dark venomous snake gradually transformed into a human form. It was the black-robed man who had just faked his death. His lips were extremely pale, and his spiritual energy was disordered, but his cold eyes were staring at the two of them. To be precise, he was staring at Bairuoxi. Where is the Chi of Heaven? The black-robed man asked coldly. Musian frowned, staring at the black-robed man standing in front of the cave entrance, and said slowly, you are not dead yet. The black-robed man said, hey, I was almost killed by you, Master Mu. Although it is only the Chi training realm, you humans are really hard to guard against when playing tricks. But you have tricks, and we also have means of escape. The black-robed man raised his head, and a pair of cold eyes under the hat stared at Musian. Master Mu, are you surprised now? As he spoke, he exuded amazing spiritual energy. Even though he was seriously injured, the power of the spirit training realm was still fully demonstrated at this moment. Bairuoxi covered her shoulders tightly. From the beginning, She felt a sense of powerlessness constantly drilling into her body. It was the venom just now. The venom was eroding her spiritual energy, so that she could hardly even activate the bronze sword now. Give up struggling. The bronze sword is indeed tricky, but after all, you are just a junior in the chi training realm. As long as your meridians are temporarily blocked, you will be just an ordinary person. The black-robed man put his hands behind his back and stared at Musian. Master Mu, do you want to die quickly, or do you want to experience the feeling of living a life worse than death? Musian was startled and said, it seems to make no difference. Hand over the chi of heaven obediently, and I can give you a happy life. The energy of heaven is not here, Musian said, inadvertently glancing behind the man in black robe. The man in black robe laughed and said, do you really think of me as a fool, Master Mu? The energy of heaven is in the hands of your little girlfriend, right? Since you are unwilling to take the initiative to hand over the chi of heaven, then I can only do it myself. The man in black robe stretched out his palm to grab Bairuoxi. Musian's expression remained unchanged, but he just stood in front of Bairuoxi. The man in black robe chuckled, a friend in need is a friend indeed, but what use are you, a chi training monk, in front of me? Muji quietly stared at the man in black robe, looked over his shoulder towards the hole behind him, and said with a smile, of course I am useless as a chi training monk, but, do you want to look behind you? Are you trying to say that the people who just surrounded and suppressed me have already come after me? The man in black robe sneered, in their eyes, I am already dead by now. I'm afraid they are still slowly looking for you everywhere. Yes, this is the real confidence of the man in black robe. Every once in a while, as a demon cultivator, he can shed his skin, and through this layer of sloughing, he can fake his death and hide the truth. However, this mold can only be used when seriously injured. If it is not used, it will automatically expire after a few months. A monk in the realm of refining the gods can already be arrogant, not to mention that the demon cultivator has innate power, so he rarely uses sloughing. This time, he fell into the hands of this kid who was in the chi training realm. But now it's all over, and no one will interfere with his actions now. Since you are unwilling to hand over the chi of heaven, then I will do it myself. After the man in black robe said this, he no longer hesitated and raised his hand to grab Musian. However, Musian still didn't make any movement, just watched helplessly as the hand was about to touch him. The man in black robe stared closely into Musian's eyes, hoping to see fear in his eyes, and even hoping that his calmness would collapse at this moment and he would kneel down and beg for mercy. But he saw nothing in Musian's eyes, only indifference. What are you still pretending to do now? The black-robed man's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and the aura in his palm drew out the spiritual energy, which turned into a sharp blade of nothingness and slashed at Musian. Bite! At this moment, a girl behind her unsheathed her sword and blocked the nihilistic blade. The man in black robe suddenly turned his head and looked. A woman wearing a moon-white dress stood quietly at the entrance of the cave. Her face was covered with a layer of gauze, her figure was convex, and her beautiful eyes were as cold as ice. Watch him. Ayasi I section. The man in black robe stared at the woman uncertainly and spoke the name with difficulty. The queen has never led demons to invade Dongzhou because of the existence of Liangyi sect. Almost every year, many demon cultivators die at the hands of disciples of the Liangyi section. Although the leader of the demons is powerful, he is unwilling to fight against the empress of the Liangyi sect. Even the sky-swallowing giant python is not sure it can deal with the empress. To the demon cultivator, Liangyi sect is the most deadly enemy among mortal enemies, and they will never stop fighting if they meet. Senior sister, Musian shouted. Lan Mulian glanced at Musian coldly. Even though she didn't say anything, it was not difficult to tell her meaning from her eyes. I am not your senior sister. Her eyes quickly fell on the man in black robe, and her voice was clear and cold, and she said, the remnants of the demon cultivator actually ran to the foot of the Liangyi Sex mountain. How brave they are! The man in black robe's eyes flashed slightly, staring at Lan Mulian uncertainly. He frowned and subconsciously stepped back, his body gradually turning into black mist, as if he wanted to escape. Lan Mulian raised his finger lightly, and almost at that moment, moon-white light enveloped him from all directions. The light instantly formed a cage, trapping the black mist incarnating the man in black robes. The seemingly temperatureless light looked extremely hot to the man in black robe, and he could only struggle hard in the cage, but to no avail. Now seriously injured, he is no match for Lan Mulian and can only become a piece of meat on others' chopping board. Lan Mulian ignored the incompetent and furious man in black robes, and his eyes inadvertently passed over Bairuoxi's body and fell directly on Musian's body. Under the tool, there was a faint smile in a pair of magnificent eyes. Road. It looks like I came at the right time. She stretched out her left hand and opened her palm, and there was a paper crane in her palm. The paper crane that Musian just threw out of the cave. It was through this paper crane that she found Musian's location. Thank you, senior sister. Musian hugged his fists. If he hadn't specially written a letter to invite Lan Mulian to come over, he might have ended up here with Bairuoxi today. Sure enough, it was the right decision to hug my senior sister's long legs. Seeing Lan Mulian's faint yes, Musian continued, what does senior sister plan to do with him? This demon cultivator is cunning by nature, and I won't be able to control him for too long. Lan Mulian said softly, it needs to be solved as soon as possible. The roar in the cage has disappeared. It seems that the man in black robe has given up or passed out. Before that, I have something I want to talk to him about, Musian said. Lan Mulian glanced at Musian and nodded gently, I will control him temporarily. After saying that, she raised her hand and opened a hole in the cage. When Musian walked into the cage, Lan Mulian glanced at Bairuoxi again inadvertently. The girl was also looking at her. The two looked at each other and then looked away. The atmosphere seemed awkward and silent. In the cage at this moment, Musian had slowly walked up to the man in black robe who seemed to have given up struggling. Although he couldn't see his face clearly, he could probably feel the calmness after giving up the struggle from the black-robed man, which he described as numb. He originally thought that a mere Tianqian city would be a sideways journey for him as a demon cultivator. He even deliberately investigated all kinds of information about Tianqian city, and finally chose Musian, a playboy, because this kind of LSP is always easier to use. However, who would have thought that in just a short time, he would be played in such an embarrassing manner by such a junior. Master Mu, I did underestimate you. The man in black robe spoke slowly. Although you are only in the Qi training realm, your strategy is exactly what the queen needs. Musian raised his eyebrows slightly and said, are you planning to win over me? The man in black robe raised his head and spoke calmly, join us and I will introduce you to the seventh seed. With your abilities, you may be able to become the queen's right-hand man in the future. Under the gaze of the man in black robe, Musian slowly walked to the opposite side of him and sat down. If someone didn't know the truth, they might think that this was a pair of old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. I'm not interested in the demon clan because I'm human, Musian said. The man in black robe sneered, humans. Are humans really better than monsters? They are intrigues, and people in the government and the public are at odds with each other. How many people die from droughts and floods every year, and no rescue measures are taken by the court? In the final analysis, this imperial court is in ruins. If it weren't for the support of the Liangyi sect, Dongzhou would have been controlled by the queen long ago. Human beings are no better than monsters, the human heart is even scarier than monsters. Musian did not deny it, shook his head and said with a smile. But I'm not interested in running all the way from Dongzhou to Bizhu. The two places are so far apart. It would be inconvenient if I want to return to Tianqian city at any time. Also, Do you think I would still believe what you say in this situation? Musian asked. The man in black robe was silent for a moment. The two sides were fighting each other and even wanted to kill each other. Now that they suddenly invited someone, even a fool would not believe it, let alone Musian. Actually, I feel quite relaxed chatting with you, Musian suddenly said. The man in black robe was slightly startled, but before he could speak, Musian continued, because you have no brain. Because of his own strength, this demonic cultivator doesn't bother to play any tricks. His purpose is very simple and he can say whatever he wants. It is not so tiring to communicate with such a very frank and honest bad guy. The energy of heaven is what that beautiful snake wants. Musian changed the subject. What he was referring to was naturally the leader of the group of demons, the sky-swallowing python queen. Hearing Musian's insult to the queen, the man in black robe suddenly raised his head, with unconcealable murderous intent bursting out of his eyes. But looking at Musian's indifferent expression, he slowly regained his original calmness. Master Mu has solved Yayu and brought back the beauty. What are you going to do next? Kill Yayu or marry Bairuoxi first? The man in black robe also changed the subject. What this means is that there is no intention to leak any information about the demon clan. Mu Jian also knew the truth, so he shook his head. I won't kill Yayu. Of course, I have no plans to get married in the short term. You don't want Yayu's life, and you don't want Bairuoxi, then what do you want? The man in black robe stared at Musian. Musian raised his head, met his gaze, and suddenly showed a gentle smile. I want you dead.